I'm doing an activism project to raise awareness for eating disorders through my Citizens in Action class, and I need to talk to an expert or someone who knows a lot about it. So I was wondering if you would be able to answer some questions that I have.
I'm not an expert, I'm just a mom. I'm a mom whose daughter had an eating disorder.
Could you tell me about your organization?
Moonshadow Spirit is in memory of Jennifer. Jennifer recovered. She suffered for 10 years. She recovered from her eating disorder. She did not die from her eating disorder. She recovered. After recovery, she spoke to junior high classes in Webster. She tried to help other people who had eating disorders. After she died, I received mail from people all over the world that I didn't know, and asked them how they knew Jennifer, and they knew her because she was on an online site for people with eating disorders, and she was trying to help them. Her login name on that site was Moonshadow, which is why we call it Moonshadow Spirit.
Does society influence the way people see their bodies?
Everywhere you go, people want to be thin, right? I mean, let's see. How many talk shows talk about being thin besides Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Oprah, the doctors? They all talk about being thin, and every advertisement you see talks about being thin. Even some magazines will Photoshop people's images so they look thinner, like Kelly Clarkson gets photoshopped so that she looks thin when she's really not, and it doesn't seem to have hurt her career. But so yeah, I think they do affect how we see our bodies.
What do you hope people who go to your events get out of them?
I hope they see that, through the speakers, that eating disorders are not just a bunch of teenage girls on a diet fad. That there's a lot more to it. It's not just a diet that will go away and then they'll be healthy again. So I hope when we speak at events that they see that there's a whole bunch of people get eating disorders.
Mm-hmm. How does your organization help people who are suffering from eating disorders?
We provide them, well, first of all, I'll back up. Eating disorders are a mental health issue and not very often covered by insurance. And so it costs, for residential treatment, around $1,000 a day, and people need 30 to 60 days. And without insurance covering, families will mortgage their homes or do whatever they have to do. And so we're there to help pay for some of that stuff. We can't ever afford $60,000. I wish we could, but we can provide, $4,000, $5,000.
And how many people have you helped so far?
We have sent checks to treatment centers for 19 people, and I have 6 more that we just processed Monday that we'll send checks for. So hopefully it'll be 25 in the next few weeks, but right now it's at 19 and about $55,000. And then when we get to the 25, it'll be 25 and about $70,000.
Okay. And what happens if a person doesn't get proper psychological treatment?
Then their eating disorder doesn't go away.
Okay.
A lot of insurance companies and doctors will focus on the weight, and so once their weight gets to what doctors consider normal, they'll then discharge them, and it doesn't. People just go right back to the eating disorder because the weight is not the issue.
And then, how did the myths about eating disorders begin, and why do people believe them?
I don't know how they began. I don't know how they began. I couldn't tell you that. I can tell you there's always these Lifetime movies about eating disorders, or you'll see Dr. Phil with an extremely thin woman, and he'll rush in to save the family and save the person. So I think the media likes the sensationalized part, and not the part that it's really just a long struggle. And so the media probably likes to show a young woman who's thin and dying, and that's what they want to show, versus someone like Jennifer, who's just struggling every day trying to get better. So I think that's what contributes to it. Plus, you'll get movie stars and models and singers who say, I had an eating disorder, and I think people then say, oh, it's just those spoiled kids.
And how do they begin the eating disorder?
It's probably related to genetics, so it's probably inherited, but also some sort of neurological issue in the brain. They don't really know what causes it because not much money gets spent on research for eating disorders. So it's not really sure what the cause is, but there are triggers. So for some people it really is they went on a diet to lose weight and they couldn't stop. For some people like Jennifer, it was a transition. Going from home to a high pressure school like Cornell was all of a sudden a huge change and a lot of pressure. And it's not just Cornell. A lot of schools that are Ivy League and put a lot of pressure on you for grades tend to get a lot of eating disorders. For my friend Lauren, it was when her son joined the Navy. So for some people, it's a divorce. For older women, it could be a divorce, or for kids, it could be a divorce. Their parents get divorced, a death, whatever causes somebody who, for some reason, doesn't eat well for a while, then can't stop. So there are triggers. What causes it is a little different, usually related to anxiety disorders like OCD and that kind of thing.
Okay. And how long does it take for it to affect the body, like when people start to notice it?
Well, when the individual starts to notice it, or when other people start to notice it?
Well, both.
And the individual's really focused on their weight. So for anorexia, people will notice it because the person will get really thin. For bulimia, you might never notice it by looking at someone. Bulimics generally are a normal weight, what we would consider a normal weight. So you might not notice that someone's bulimic until they get rushed to the hospital because their electrolytes are bad or something. So that's another myth, is that it's always a very thin person. That's only anorexics. Bulimics are not necessarily that way. So you might not notice. You would only notice if you realize when you go out with your friends to eat, if someone doesn't come with you. That probably means they have an eating disorder. You'd notice that if they do come with you and eat, they run to the bathroom immediately. So you would notice those kind of signs, but not in their body.
Okay. And how can a person help and support a friend or loved one who is suffering?
Well, the first thing is never agree to keep it a secret, because it's deadly. People die every day from eating disorders. The second is to learn a lot about these eating disorders so that you can talk to them, so that they know you care and you support them. Offer to go with them for treatment so that when they go see somebody. Bulimics have an especially hard time because most of us, when someone says they purge, we think, oh, how could you possibly do that? Well, if someone trusts you enough to say, I'm bulimic and I purge, the last thing they want you to say is, oh, that's disgusting. So it's very important to just show them how much you care and that you're their friend. And people with eating disorders will isolate. They will separate themselves from their friends and they'll be very alone. So it's important to not have that happen. Let them know somebody's there.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, what is like the leading, like when you have an eating disorder, like how do they usually die? Like,
well, your organs start to fail. Your heart will fail. Your heart's just a muscle, and it will fail from not getting enough nutrition. Or if you're bulimic, it will fail because your electrolytes will drop. Your kidneys will fail. It's a whole mess of things because your organs will just stop. They'll just stop working because they aren't getting enough nourishment. Or if you're bulimic, it's because you're depleting yourself of electrolytes and potassium, and so your heart can't beat very well without them. And so that's generally how people die. But because it's a very lonely disease, it is very lonely, and people tend to isolate themselves. Many will commit suicide because they just feel alone. they feel helpless and alone, and that's why I said it's important as a friend to be there for them and not let them feel alone. Anything else?
That's it.
That's it? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.